So we're going to talk about criticising photographs. So what do we mean by criticism? So Terry Barrett says it's informed discourse about art to increase understanding and appreciation. It's not necessarily so. The word criticism, critical, critique is normally inferred that we're talking about something in a negative way. But criticism is also, in art terms, in photography terms, is about understanding. So we go through a process when we're criticising photographs. We go through four verbs. We describe. So we describe the objects in the image. We describe what we can actually see, and we can be quite literal in this. We analyse. So we're looking at the technical, the design, the composition, and the functions of the image that give us an impression of what it is we're looking at. Then we interpret. So we use those functions and the description and the design elements to see if we can attach meaning to the image. And then we evaluate. So we're looking at is the image successful? Does it do what we perceive it to set out to do? Has it been successful in its application? So from the dictionary, the word describe is to give a detailed account in words of. He described his experiences in a letter to his parents. It's pretty straightforward. We're just literally describing what we can see in the picture. So we go through a process there. What's happening in the work? What do you see? What's in the foreground? What's in the background? What's the setting? Is it well? I mean, if it's a photograph, it's usually realist. But I mean, an abstract can be something which is just in photographic terms. You can't really literally have abstract photography because you always have to point the lens at something in the real world. But it can be something that's abstracted from reality. So even a black and white photograph could be considered an abstraction, but something in extreme close-up or just taking parts of an image of an object could be seen as abstract. What's the story? Can you see a story there? And what do you see that makes you say that? So what indicators, signifiers in the image point you to a story? What clues are provided to tell you more about the subject? So it's like a detective story. What little bits in the image? What objects are in there? What's to do with colour and things like that will lead you to some meaning? And what clues tell you when and where this work was made? So there's usually you can date pictures by the way people are dressed, hairstyles, cars. Or simply whether it's colour or black and white sometimes gives you a little bit of an indication of date. The second verb, analyse. So according to the dictionary, examine methodically and in detail, typically in order to explain or interpret it. We need to analyse our results more clearly. So analyse is something that scientists do a lot, and is something that we do as teachers, where we analyse results. But we're also analysing the description of the image so that we can move on to come up with an interpretation. So when we analyse pictures, we're looking at the composition and how it's framed. So we're looking for things like rule of thirds, and are certain objects placed on those key positions that we know about in the rule of thirds, and if so, does that give them greater importance, those objects? Line, we're looking for leading lines sometimes can take us to a specific part of the image and lead us to interpret a certain way. Colour and value, well, certain colours will be warm and other colours will be cool. Some tones will be darker, which gives you a more foreboding, if you like. So last week you looked at the picture of Don McCullen's shell-shocked Marine, and some of you noted that the black and white image gave you a much darker, much more low-key feeling about the situation that he found himself in. Texture. Well, you can read a lot in photography, a lot of text about an object by its texture. You can see whether things are smooth or rough, or soft, or jagged, or sharp. Space, so perspective, foreground, middle ground, background, point of view. So there's also negative space. So is that important? Does that lead your eye to certain parts of the image? And contrast. Is the color scale a strong contrast? Is the difference between black and white, is it powerful or is it subtle? And then emphasis, how your eye is led. So leading lines will help to lead your eye as well. So rhythm, pattern, movement, balance, symmetry, all of these things will give us a feeling about an image. If it's evenly balanced, if it's nicely balanced, it might be a calming effect. If there's more tension there, you've got negative space, you might have something which is more uncomfortable. And what is the focus of the work and how is it achieved? So focus can be, the literal focus, so it's sharpness, but it can also be where you place certain objects. If you place things in the center of a picture or on one of those sweet points on the rule of thirds, could lead your opinion to something else. And interpret. So we're going to take all of that information and we're going to interpret it. So we're going to, the verb from the dictionary, explain the meaning of. The evidence is difficult to interpret. Well, what we just looked at, the description and the analysis, is evidence. And what we need to do is we need to interpret that evidence. So how does the work evoke feelings, ideas and images? What indicators, signifiers were there that give you certain feelings? How's the artist achieved this using the elements and principles of design? What do you think is the theme or subject of the work? And why do you think that? And what message or meaning do you think the work communicates? What do you think is the purpose of this work? So is it there to tell you a story? Is it there to persuade you to think a certain way? What does it all mean? And then finally, we're going to evaluate. So this, again, from the dictionary, to form an idea of the amount, number, or value of. Well, in this case, a value is going to be whether it's a good or bad picture, really. Did it work? The study will assist in evaluating the impact of recent changes. Well, that's maybe, that's the dictionary definition. We have to adjust that a little bit as photographers. So have your perceptions or feelings towards the piece changed? So when you first saw the picture, you would have instantly come up with some sort of reading of it, and then as you dug deeper and went through the four verbs: describe, analyze, interpret, have those initial thoughts changed? Does the work possess high or technical or conceptual skill? So is this a great photograph or is this a mediocre photograph? Is this an effective piece of work? Why or why not? So let's look at this picture. This is a picture by photographer Martin Parr, and it's from a body of work called The Last Resort. The Last Resort was made in about 1988 or thereabouts. And The Last Resort that he's talking about is a place near Liverpool called New Brighton. In the 80s, when Margaret Thatcher came into power and made a decision to close a lot of industry, the decision being that it was cheaper to pay people benefits than it was to pay them wages from a business industry that was losing money. So a decision was made to close a lot of industry and a lot of people became unemployed. when people were working in factories and leading different lifestyles, that more money was coming in, they were able to take holidays abroad. That happened quite a lot in the 70s, 60s, 70s. People went off to Spain and Greece and those places for their holidays. But now that since the post-industrial era of the 80s, and people were there was more unemployment. So the unemployment went from 1979 under a Labour government from 1 million to 1983 under Thatcher to 3 million. So there was a significant unemployment. A lot of the people of Liverpool who were now in more difficult situation couldn't afford their Spanish holidays, so they went more local to a resort, a seaside town called New Brighton. Martin Parr went there in the 80s, late 80s, and took a satirical look at people on holiday in New Brighton. Some said it was unfair. Some said it was intrusive and voyeuristic. And as Martin Parr, as a middle class man, he was not in a position to poke fun at those that were in a less of a fortunate position than himself. It was a good piece of work, though. Whatever your opinion of his motives and the effect of the work, it stood as a good document of a time. This is one image from that set. So what we're going to do, we're going to go through the verbs. So the first thing I want you to do is describe this picture. So when we do this in the classroom, you'll be actually calling out and telling us what you see, but I'm going to tell you what I see, because we're doing this as a recorded piece. So what I'm looking at is a male and a female sitting opposite each other. The male has a cigarette in his mouth. If I hadn't already told you that these pictures were made in 1988, you could assume from that that they were made. They were certainly made in a time before 2007, which is when the smoking ban came in. So the man has a cigarette in his mouth. They're sitting at a table. They're not looking at each other. There's a tablecloth that looks like it might be vinyl. There's salt and pepper and vinegar in the middle of the table, and I think probably a plate of sliced bread. The lady's doing something with her hand. Above their heads, there's a space, and then there's a double lamp standard, and there's something stuck in the double lamp standard. Behind the man, there's a curtain, so that might be the curtain around the door where you come into the place, or it might be a curtain around the kitchen where the waiter comes from. And then behind the lady is another person sat at a table. So let's analyse this. So let's think about the composition first of all. So where's he placed the figures? Both the figures are placed on one of those sweet spots at the rule of thirds, but they're both sat with the double lamps, directly in between the two of them. It's evenly spaced. There's even amount of space behind the man and even amount of space behind the lady. The lamps are sitting in the middle. Also, it's quite low in the frame. So Martin Parr, we know, was a very competent photographer and very capable of filling a frame, but he's chosen to keep them low in the frame. Why do you think he might have done that? Is that a good thing? Is it a bad thing? We'll come back to that. So we're going to interpret some of that information. So we've said that they're sitting in a space, and there's a cloth on the table that looks vinyl. There's salt and pepper and vinegar and bread and butter. So we can guess where they are. They're in some sort of cafe or restaurant. It's not a high grade restaurant because the surroundings are minimal. The table setting is minimal. There's not silver service or anything like that. She's still got a coat on. He's got his jacket on. You can date it by the fact that he's smoking. It's definitely before 2007, but you can also get an idea of date from the way they're dressed, the lady's hairstyle. And what about what she's doing with her hand? Is that relevant? What's she looking at? Is she looking at somewhere specific on her hand? What's she got hold of? Well, I think she's holding her wedding ring, and she's looking at her wedding ring. They don't look very happy. They're probably husband and wife. The thing about her looking at her wedding ring gives you a feeling that maybe they're not happy in their relationship, but maybe they've just had a brief argument and they're just not happy in that space at that moment. What about this thing about being low in the frame? Is there a reason for that? Well, we know that Martin Parr is a good photographer. We know that he's more than capable of filling a frame. So has he done this on purpose? Has he made the space above their heads greater because he wants us to look somewhere? Well, I think he wants us to look at that double lamp thing. So between the double lamp set up on the wall there is a leaf of some sort, is a branch of some sort. What do you think that branch is? What do you think it symbolises? Does it symbolise something? Right, I think that branch is relevant, and we're going to come to the relevance in the next slide. But let's evaluate this and look at the qualities of this picture. So we've said the composition is unusual in that they're low in the frame, except they are sitting on the thirds, on the sweet spots on the thirds. Our eye is drawn to that double lamp thing and that branch in between the lamps. It is relevant. The fact that she's looking at her ring gives us an impression that maybe she's feeling reflective about the marriage and the whole situation. So, and he doesn't look happy. He's got his fag hanging, drooping out of his mouth. He doesn't look in a good place. They look as though they might have had an argument to me. So I think this could be quite a strong picture. Despite the fact that the composition is a bit unusual, I think it's unusual for a reason, because I think he wants us to look at that branch in between those two lamps, and this is why I think he's asking us to look at that branch. I think that branch is an olive branch, and an olive branch is often used to symbolise peace or to end arguments. So you hand an olive branch to end an argument, end a dispute. So it says in here, what does it mean to offer an olive branch? Something that someone does in order to show that they want to stop arguing. The olive branch is often used as a sign meaning peace. Extend an olive branch. He extended an olive branch to community leaders by offering to meet them. I think that picture is excellent. I think that picture is about those little minor arguments that couples have, and the fact that there's some humour there. I think it's a very funny picture, and it's taken a stab at maybe an unfair stab at a way of life, and so therefore I would say this picture is of high quality.